So Godzilla Minus One, I never heard. I heard of this movie like Friday, this past Friday, or Thursday, last week. This is the first I heard of it. I don't know. Even though my job is to pay attention to what's out there, TV shows, movies, video games, there's just so much that I can't keep up. I just can't. But somebody on Twitter, I believe it was, asked if I'd seen this movie yet, and I went and looked it up. Much to my shock and surprise, it was at the time 97% on Rotten Tomatoes with like a 98% user review score. It's a Godzilla movie. These movies just don't score that high. Now, I realized, okay, actually it's a Japanese Godzilla movie, which is not, I mean, obviously Godzilla started in Japan, and the history of Godzilla is completely tied to Japan, and I'll talk about that in a second. But so much of the MonsterVerse or whatever lately has been American. There's been all kinds of American-made Godzilla movies with, for decades now. I think the latest one was the one with 11 from Stranger Things. Billy, whatever the fuck, Millie Bobby Brown. That was a terrible movie. I have tried to start the Monarch Legacy of Monsters show on Apple, and I can't stay focused on it. There's other things I'd rather watch. It might be great. I just can't get into it. But I was intrigued from what I heard from people. They were like, yeah, I know it's Japanese and it has a, wartime, like Dunkirk vibe. Sounded great. So I don't go to the movies a lot these days. It's kind of a lot. It takes up a lot of your day. The last movie I went to was The Holdovers with Paul Giamatti, which was wonderful, by the way. I should make another video about that one. But I didn't go to the Marvels. I haven't been to I didn't go to Blue Beetle. There's like all these superhero movies I just don't even care about anymore. But I went to this one on Sunday, and it's absolutely great. It's a really good movie. It's very Japanese. It's very serious. It's not it's not a light romp. It's not about, kids figuring out how to stop the monsters or a trip to the center of the earth or anything like that. It takes place at the end of and directly after World War II. The main character is a kamikaze pilot who doesn't go through with the kamikaze thing and abandons their duty, and then, this is all very early in the movie, sees Godzilla and things go very badly, and he's left with the trauma of this experience, the trauma of both his failure to do his duty in the war itself, and this horrific experience with this monster on one of these little Japanese islands. And then we see Japan after the atomic bomb, we see the Japanese people rebuilding, and then Godzilla returns. And so this is all taking place within a few years after World War II and the aftermath of the atomic bombs being dropped by America on Japan. It's interesting for a couple of reasons. For one, one of the most recent movies I've been to in the theaters is Oppenheimer, Christopher Nolan's biopic about Oppenheimer, the mastermind behind the atomic bomb. And it's a really good timing that this Godzilla came out, because to see kind of that movie followed by this movie, it's very fitting. And it made me think a lot about one thing that's been bothering me about all these American Godzilla movies. And that is that Godzilla is a symbol of national trauma over the atomic bomb for the Japanese people. And that's what this movie really conveys. This idea that this horrible cataclysmic event took place. The bombs were dropped, these cities were leveled, thousands of people died, and now this radioactive monster has come back, or has arrived for the first time. But it's like the bomb has been manifested into this creature who's coming here to once again wreak havoc, destruction, mayhem, and death. and that anxiety that the Japanese people felt after these horrific bombs went off. That is what Godzilla is. It's the embodiment of all that trauma and anxiety and fear and devastation into this horrific, larger-than-life creature, this force of nature. And what really bothers me about the American-made Godzilla stuff is that we're the ones who dropped the fucking bomb, man. I'm not saying that like Japan was guiltless in World War II, but a lot of the people killed with those bombs were civilians, children. I mean, it was. I'm not going to get into the debate over whether it was the right or wrong thing to do or whatever. I mean, that's a whole other conversation. But the fact of the matter remains, Godzilla is a symbol of Japan's national trauma, fear, and anxiety over the atomic bomb and the devastation that it wreaked upon their land and their cities, their people. Now, you hear the phrase cultural appropriation bandied about a lot, and a lot of times it's bullshit. When there's some white chicks running a taco place, and people are like, run them out of town, they're culturally appropriating Mexican food. That's ridiculous. Anyone can cook any kind of food. That's not cultural appropriation. That's cultural sharing, and we should do lots of sharing of our cuisines and our fashion and our entertainment and our music. That's what makes this world so wonderful in a lot of ways, is the fact that we can share these things, and that it doesn't matter if you live in if you live in Iraq, you can still make spaghetti. If you live in Canada, you can still make Mexican food. You should be able to share cultures. And so, when I see that somebody tweet that potato salad is cultural appropriation from black people by white people, I just roll my eyes. But there are instances where I think cultural appropriation is I mean, the term itself is just screwed at this point. But there are instances where, like, you can take something from a culture in a way that is kind of shitty. Like, for instance, Hitler and the Nazis took the swastika symbol from Indian people in India, Hindi symbology, and used that for the Third Reich and Nazism. They took a symbol from another culture, and now it's associated forever with the Third Reich, with Nazis, with the Holocaust, with fascism. Similarly, white supremacists have taken Norse runes and symbols and used them as tattoos for their white supremacist gangs, and now police and other law enforcement people, look for those tattoos and then immediately associate them with these white supremacist gangs, Aryan Nation, and all that shit. That's stealing from a culture and taking it and repurposing those symbols, and that's appropriation. I would say that's appropriation. I also think that there's a strong case to be made that professional sports teams should not be using Native American headdresses and so forth as a mascot for their teams. But that gets a little more complicated because obviously there's also the Vikings, and there's all these. But anyways, I do think that taking Godzilla and making it like an American IP where it's, Godzilla's come to New York or whatever, and it's Americans fighting Godzilla and all that. I just feel like that's a little bit like fucked up, because we're the ones who dropped the bomb that Godzilla is symbolizing in the first place. We did not experience that same national trauma that Japan experienced when the bombs were dropped. We won the war, which is great. I mean, yay for us. Good job, America. But maybe something like Godzilla is so fundamentally Japanese that it just can't work as an American story, right? And maybe there's just something a little messed up about trying to do that, given the history and all the people who died. But you know what? Whatever. Do your thing. Do whatever you want. I'm not going to freak out about it. But I did like this movie. For one thing, I did like that this was a Japanese production and that it really focused on, the devastation caused by the bombs and how much Godzilla represents that and how frightening that is and how devastating. And I just think it was a really well-produced movie. The music was great. Godzilla, I think Godzilla's always a little goofy looking, but I thought he looked pretty scary in this movie, and I thought the CGI was great because it just looked very real. It wasn't super flashy, although there is a pretty cool thing he does when he charges up his like radioactive breath death ray thing. That was cool. The action's great. There's a lot of, it's a very character driven movie, so you get a lot of, really the main character's PTSD and he's just kind of a really screwed up guy and doesn't treat people all that well because of it. But that's realistic to war. People come home from war, veterans come home, and they've got a lot of mental health issues a lot of the time. It's hard to come back and fit in with the rest of the world who maybe didn't experience the same thing. So I think that was all. It all gave it all a very human quality, and it was exciting. It got very tense at times. And just to, it was a very satisfying movie. And I'm usually just like, I roll my eyes at most Godzilla movies. I find them goofy and not frightening and not particularly... most of the time I see a Godzilla movie or something like it, it's like the characters are two-dimensional cardboard characters I could care less about. And this one I actually cared about the characters. And I think this goes to a point that I've made many times in my reviews of films and TV that rely too much on CGI, that rely too much on, and you see this in Marvel a lot, they rely too much on like cheap humor and big fights and big special effects, and not not compelling scripts or characters or those human connections that actually give life to these stories. Even these stories about zombies and superheroes and monsters, they still are at their best when they give us characters that we can care about. So this movie did that really well, even though it's Japanese, so there is like that cultural disconnect to some degree. But I still, it reminds me of something like, although I don't think it was as good as was it Last Train to Busan? Last Train to Busan, the Korean zombie movie. There's some similarities there, but that movie was awesome. And one of the things about it that was so great is it gave us great characters and horrible characters to root for and against throughout, this zombie saga. That's why I've watched that movie more than once, because it's not just really great zombie stuff, but actually characters that you do care about or begin to care about. You maybe at first didn't like so much. And that's kind of the same thing here. So definitely go see it on a big screen. Go to the movies if you can, if this is in your area. I saw it in Japanese but with subtitles, and I definitely don't recommend a dub. Nobody should ever watch dubbed anything. Subtitles are the way to go. It's 2 hours long, just about 2 hours long, so it doesn't outwear its welcome. It gets to the point. It even though it's character driven, it's not slow. Yeah. I'm not even trying to say the characters' names, but and I won't spoil any more of the plot. Suffice to say, it's a period piece just post World War II, which is a great setting in Japan, all Japanese produced, Japanese made, Japanese actors, yada yada yada. Godzilla Minus One, go see it. Highly recommend it. 2 thumbs up, and don't forget to like, subscribe, hit the notification bell. Thanks for watching. Peace.